Going back to, ancient Greek times, you have the philosophers complaining about the youth not learning to memorize stuff because writing was invented. I think there's always been a hot new tech of the day, is it good or bad kind of discussion.
Do we want to have a podcast about AI and optimism and whatever? I don't really want to.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's very talked out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we should do a ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I think we're just going to be doing an AI episode. The reluctant AI episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automated, where we are grunting and unhappy and sad. Well, this is a podcast where we talk about robotics every week. We're, of course, the co-founders of Polymath Robotics. We might even be having some guests sometime soon. We've invited a couple of people, mostly to be nice, and maybe it's going to be happening and someone's going to show up. But this is Automated, our weekly podcast. I, of course, am your host, Stefan Seltz-Oxmacher. Sitting across from me is a man who doesn't seem to believe in the intelligent design of Legos. And I, for one, believe that a series of people in Copenhagen made direct design decisions for every Lego that's ever been created. But sir, your shirt seems to argue towards an evolutionary process of plastic into
I don't know. You put enough Lego blocks in a box and you shake it around, something does come out sometimes. For all you watchmakers out there.
This, of course, is Automated, our weekly podcast where we talk about robotics. We start off by playing a game where we spitball a robot together, and then we talk about some subject in robotics. And we sat down before the podcast officially started recording, though apparently some of these clips will be used either in our LinkedIn material or in this episode, if you're unlucky enough, and started talking trash about AI stuff. So I think this is going to be our reluctant AI episode, or one of several reluctant AI episodes. I don't actually keep track of what we talk about. So maybe we've done this 4 times before, and you're just a really lucky listener.
I just feel, yes. I feel like we've talked about this.
But Elliot, what type of AI do you build?
All of the AI. All of it. The knowledge AI system that we keep bringing up.
So, background of making this our reluctant AI episode is we wanted to talk about magic sensors that solve all your problems. And we got conflicted because we both had a conversation recently where someone proposed a magic sensor, and we also met a magic sensor that we're excited about. So we both wanted to talk about that, but also at what point does magic stop being magic and just starts being a real sensor? So instead, we started having a conversation about this AI panel I was on last week, and reluctantly, then Nicole told us that she used ChatGPT to come up with some new card ideas for us, and one of them was compelling. So I think that's more or less what we're going to do.
Yeah. So in replacement for our usual game this week,
ChatGPT has instructed us that we're going to be thinking about robots on urban rooftop gardens.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's the technology? ChatGPT.
Okay.
Or rooftop. Okay.
So I have a lot of thoughts about this, as I have many things. I love the idea of having a wonderful urban garden. I have a backyard that is currently fully overgrown with weeds. I love the idea of a backyard garden. I will do no work for this. Separately, I once remember a guy who I worked in the same co-working space with years ago. And he told me he was looking for a new apartment in San Francisco. And I said, what type of thing are you looking for? I want a really nice, co-op type of environment with an urban farm. And, in San Francisco, I'm sure there's a couple of options for urban farm co-ops. I'm sure more than one, but I have never used that as a basis for picking my own apartment, access to an urban farm. So I'm thinking this is the robot for that guy, Laurent, who maybe Nicole, our producer here, remembers. He was working on a game with robots or whatever, 8 years ago. So we need to build a robot that uses machine vision for Laurent's urban farm. And I think for an urban farm, I'm pretty sure the top levels, he had some chickens and probably some vegetables on the roof of an apartment building or backyard in San Francisco.
Chickens too. Oh boy.
Yeah. And as a busy founder, because he was a founder as well, or maybe still is, who knows? I haven't talked to him in 10 years. Probably it needs to be a fairly self-managed robotic farming system.
Yeah. Well, all of our tools and equipment have been built around humans.
Yeah.
So obviously a humanoid is the best option here.
I was actually wondering if a quadcopter might be good, Because then you could like way over index on a super expensive quadcopter that then flies from urban farm to urban farm.
Yeah, I mean,
like here in the Mission, it's relatively flat. You know, the weather's really good, which is why my backyard's such a mess. You could like have like a quadcopter do like 4 hours a day of gardening tasks at like 10 people's houses.
There's two problems with that.
Or 4 hours a week at 10 people's houses.
Yeah, there's two problems with that. One is it'd be really lovely if you're in your home office and at a random point of the day, you just hear at maximum volume.
People who work from home are outside of the user base.
Okay, so like most people.
Yeah, yep.
Secondly,
I'm thinking this is like the size of like just a little bit too small to carry a person size quadcopter.
Yeah, so that is going to be really loud.
That's all right.
Super
loud. It's
a
city. It's already loud. It's no more loud than a fire truck driving down your block every 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be fine. The second problem, though, is battery life, as always with quad rotors.
So, you know what you could do? To buy into this program, you need to have robot accessible tools on your roof, including a tethered charger. So it actually only needs to fly under its own battery from house to house. Building.
I see no problem of a quad rotor picking up a garden implement 12 stories up. I think there should be no problem with that idea, especially not, accidentally dropping shears 6 stories.
They're like special garden implements. So I think it's like a quad rotor.
They're safety garden implements where if you drop them 6 stories, it won't immediately kill
No, so it's like a quad rotor. It has an arm or two that do some specialized tasks.
We're combining two very energy efficient technologies, quad rotors and arms.
Yep, it's gonna be great.
Okay.
But it lands on a pre-configured base that then connects to something where it gets power, hose, and a couple of other things.
Oh, water too.
Well, it's a garden. It needs to be watered.
Oh boy. I think at this point, humanoid would actually be easier.
Well, no, but humanoid wouldn't be able to get from house to house unless it did parkour between the buildings.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's how about this? It's a quad rotor that drops off a humanoid that does the gardening and then comes and picks them up and moves them to the next spot.
We did recently hear a pitch about carrier robots dropping off quadcopters.
So, I mean, Boston Dynamics just released a new version of a humanoid that's all electric drive.
I appreciate how they were able to get 2 stories.
One right after the other.
Yeah. One was, no more Atlas, and everyone's like, oh my God, no. And the other was like, new robot.
That's right.
Yeah, it's pretty good PR move. Well, why? Why? So to be clear, okay, in terms of tasks that I think this robot should do, maybe some specialized watering.
Yep.
And maybe some specialized weeding.
So in your life, have you held a garden hose?
Yes.
Do you notice that they're relatively weighty and unpredictable if they're at any kind of pressure because they're pushing you around? Well, it could be those two things are bad for quad rotors.
Well, so the attachment that it lands on that gets it power and hose, it might not be just a limp garden hose on the other end. It might this might then, might base plug into that, and then it has separately a little water cannon that's more of a squirt gun level of water spray.
Then why do you need the quad rotor at all at that point? Just to have the water cannon do its job.
The quad rotor is movable actuation. It's actuation that goes from building to building, where compute could be on the cloud, it could be local, whatever, who cares? It could be, connected to the base station. But really what the quad rotor is doing is it's moving the hose point and maybe a fertilizer point as well. Or, sorry, not fertilizer, herbicide to points at the different crops or at the bad chickens.
So whenever
I forgot about when minimizing this into a robot, because there's a company called Aerones that does its tethered quad rotors to, or at least at some point it was tethered quad rotors to clean windmill turbines or windmill blades. And it would just, there'd be a base station with a hose going up to the quad rotor, and it would just be teleop to fly along and spray the blades. Something basically a system like that, but the quad rotor and the vision piece goes from house to house.
Yeah, and when it's in a garden, it's actually just pulling power consistently. Yeah. I still think, again, being the green thumb that you are, a lot of your gardening task is very close to the actual ground. You need to be real close.
I guess I'm envisioning here that this is for planter boxes, on a roof that doesn't have dirt on the ground.
But I mean,
planter boxes
ground as in
around the perimeter of my roof deck.
No, but I mean, ground as in the work you're doing is close to the soil. wherever the soil is. The soil might be in a box.
Yeah, but the box is elevated from the ground.
That's fine. Yeah. But you can imagine the problem of having blades that are putting enough downforce to lift the thing, blowing at the same time as you're trying to pick out a specific leaf or bug or whatever
like
for your
next
garden.
To the window box.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you're next to the planter box.
Yeah.
The downforce is all going on the concrete. And like the sprayer could just be next to the base of the plants. So like we don't serve people who work from home. And we only serve people with planter boxes.
With planter boxes
who live within let's call it 10 block radius.
So they don't have anything under the planter box, because if there's a ground under the like if it's a raised bed, the wind will blow back and blow the plant and blow over the plant and disturb the quad rotor too.
At what point? How? I guess actually to spitball it, what are the physics of a quad rotor that above a certain weight the downforce would be such to rip a tomato bush off out of the ground?
I think it'd be pretty small. I mean, depending how carefully have you staked this tomato bush and hand woven every single twig to a support frame.
I'm a terrible gardener.
Yeah, if you're just talking about a random
in there, and now I have a quad rotor that's 20 pounds next to it.
I feel honestly the next step up from a DJI type drone would start to damage your plant right off the bat. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So we got to solve that.
Yeah. So how about this? Yeah. We did this rooftop gardening. Yep. What if instead you have a commercial crop?
Yeah.
And you're covering it in large amounts of pesticide or whatever.
Yep.
And we've just reinvented aerial spray farming.
Actually, I've seen a drone that looks, it's also a tethered drone because there's no way in hell it could fly with its own power. The base of it, or the center of it, looks like a car engine block. Yeah. And it is at a quad rotor to fly and spray pesticide.
Yep.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
And then you just have to do the lucrative business of buying everyone's rooftops in a major urban center like San Francisco so you can turn it into farmland.
Yeah.
Because that makes the most sense.
I mean, I feel like there's 4 or 5 miracles that have to happen simultaneously.
We could do this as a vertical company and just be, imagine the premium we could get selling those crops directly in the city. We could knock off, pennies. Whole pennies off each of these avocados.
If we're incredibly successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, though, you remind me.
So investors out there, we only need $14 billion. And we're going to launch urban farms powered by drones that fly from roof to roof or humanoids that do parkour. And for this, we'll be able to deliver farm fresh fruit several weeks a year in urban cities.
As long as nobody sabotages them.
And we can lease the space for free.
Though you do remind me, there was one actually group that was doing fruit picking where it was tethered quad rotors with little suction cups.
God, I've seen like 5 of those.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, the problem is always like the quad rotor strong enough to do this will disturb the thing you're trying to pick.
The quad rotors look cool.
Very cool.
So, and even better when they're powered by AI.
Well, that's if you're doing a robotics company now and you don't have AI somewhere in your marketing material, you are leaving money on the table currently.
So reluctantly talking about AI. So I was on a panel last week that was rather interesting. It was for, I'd say mostly an aspirationally technical audience. It wasn't like talking at JTC, but it also wasn't talking at like a complete nonsense conference. There's a lot of people there was like, I think probably 10% of the audience were robotics founders. Another like 10 to 20% of people like worked in robotics companies in some way. And then there's people who like, oh, robots are cool. The panelists themselves were like pretty qualified. And one of the first things that struck me is how little optimism there was about AI. Like 3 months ago, 6 months ago, I'd go to some event like this and everyone would talk about how AI is the future. It's going to solve everything. The overarching technical opinion of the people on this panel was, it could do some things kind of well. And maybe it's going to get better. And it's going to be good at X, Y, and Z. And it was very refreshing to see that in an audience that was not all just people working on AI. It seems like we are in the mode of like realization of like, oh, this isn't AGI and we should stop calling LLMs AI. I feel like we're like 6 months away from that being the general consensus that the word AI gets moved to another notch in the future. Another spoofy line I was describing right before this. But it's a thing I've thought interesting for a while. Is a question got asked that gets asked on every one of these panels about AI, of like, will this be net good or net bad? Will this make the world more equal or less equal? Will, Sam Altman single-handedly own 99% of all wealth, and we'll all be slaves to GPT-18 that is our all-encompassing master? And people gave the standard set of answers of either it's going to be better, it's going to be worse, we need to put some guardrails around AI to make sure it's the best possible thing, or like, it's a tool and tools can be used well and they can be used poorly. All these kind of like nonsense, no meaning answers that like people love to give. And I came up with a fresh nonsense, no meaning answer, which is that I feel like things like AI and robotics, more than other technologies I know, particularly get people excited to talk philosophy and talk about what they want the future to look like. And like the difference between like a Star Trek future of utopia and a Warhammer 40K ultra dark, ultra awful future. And like, I don't know of people talking about that for like Stripe or like social networks even, which is a neat thing about this space.
I would say, to push back a little bit, my thought on this one was that, people did talk about that for social networks for a while. It kind of fell out of favor to talk about that as they became less of the hot thing.
Yeah, but it wasn't as like...
I think there was a million thought pieces on like,
there's lots of
are your
pieces
kids
about, like,
on Facebook?
Kids are going to kill themselves because people are mean to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's like a little bit more the next 50 years. Whereas I feel like when people talk about like, how's AI and robotics going to shape the future, we're like talking about plan for keeps for humanity. It is at least what the tone seems like to me. If we mess this up, humanity will go into a feudal society ruled by the evil AIs. I mean, OpenAI itself was founded as a nonprofit to make sure the inevitable future of AI had friendly AI.
Yeah, speaking of which, slight tangent. I read an interesting thought piece that was saying that Musk currently is suing OpenAI for stupid reasons.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things that came out of the filing was that the maneuver that OpenAI pulled to become a for-profit company is relatively novel and clever. And if it passes the judicial smell test, a lot of startups will probably start following the exact same route
of starting off as a charity.
Of this very particular path that they've figured out and are now defending in court. And so there's this very clever way to like move wealth around while being a nonprofit, which isn't actually a nonprofit that they figured out. So there's like a novel legal case currently being figured out of, is it legit? And if it is, immediately a bunch of tech companies are going to start doing this.
Yeah. So Polymath will be a 501c3?
Oh, it's too late. We already found it. You got to do it early. So Polymaths will shut down and spin up Polymaths, which will be a 501c3.
Poly charity.
Exactly. But yeah, no, aside from that tangent, I don't know. I'm of two minds. I've heard really good argument that this is unlike any other technology because any other technology requires human input for output. Right, like fire, from fire to cluster writing bombs. To everything.
Cluster bombs, humans choose exactly where they land. These three go in a playground. These four go in a municipal waste facility.
I'm thinking more fundamentally, like everything from fire to writing to the internet requires human nuclear
bombs.
Requires human effort to keep going.
Okay.
Right, whereas theoretically, at least, and this hasn't happened yet, despite the marketing. AI does not.
Yeah.
And so that's a shift of kind. So there's some arguments to be made there. On the other hand, though, I think we're probably still a little early. It's really interesting to have these discussions, but we're probably pretty far off from actual intelligence.
Yeah.
And so we're having these preemptive talks, which if you take an actual historic lens on it, golems were discussed as a artificial human creation that does your work for you.
And then we made them and it was fine. They just became machines.
Well, yeah, right.
That's why nothing... I'm not even going to finish that joke.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that this is one of those humanity's oldest dreams, which has been around for functionally ever. I don't know if I agree with you that this has been like the first time that this has really come around.
That people have talked this for keeps?
Yeah.
I mean, I think another conversation we're having that precipitated making our podcast about this was I finally, I only read our Slack channels once a week. I treat them like physical mail. And I read an article someone posted like a week and a half ago that was a review of this annoying AI pin that I see ads for constantly. And funny, like in the ads, the person looks confused as to what the heck this thing does. But there's an interesting line at the end of the review that basically was like, yeah, the frustrating thing about this is I have no idea how it works, so I have no idea how to use it better. I don't know why sometimes I ask it, is this restaurant good? And it like in 10 seconds says the average review of this is really good and you should try to order this. And like 50% of the time it says disconnected from server, no idea what's going on. And I think a general thing with this particular set of technology is it's almost an entirely different path of technology from how we've learned how to use things before, which is both exciting because of the rapid things that it can do that are new, but also probably going to lead to slower uptake because after it is initially good at things that traditional systems are bad at,
we realize all the limitations.
Yeah, and people will like just be unwilling to figure out the limitations.
I know. Again, I want to push back a little and take the historical view here of
golems.
No, not even that far back.
Yeah.
You used to need to know how to do a search query to actually find what you were looking for.
Yes.
But even when Google first came out and their PageRank algorithm was relatively new, you still would have to figure out like keyword and quotation mark minus this plus this within these brackets, whatever. And people learn to use that tech.
Yeah.
And early on, you'd still get terrible results and failures.
Yeah.
And cell phones are another example, right? Like early
also,
internet
as
phones.
You learned how to use that tech, you like saw you could do rapid experiments of what inputs led to what outputs.
Right.
And then the different inputs would lead consistently to the better outputs, so you could learn it. Whereas that isn't true.
Ish. So my pushback here is the average person, even the average person who's in the field, cannot possibly comprehend the Google PageRank algorithm anymore.
Yeah.
Prime engineers in Google do not comprehend Google Prime or Google PageRank.
Prime.
Right.
And
Google
Amazon PageRank.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Amazon PageRank. It's way better.
So if they don't understand it, you're getting consistent results in the framework of what you're expecting. But like if I just went to Google and searched like pie, how to make, and I'm expecting to get cherry pie, like you're not going to get a good result.
It's almost as if that line that any sufficiently complicated technology is magic.
Right.
It might be that AI is magic, but we don't have any good wizards yet.
Very good. Stefan is currently super proud of himself. Yeah. But I think, again, if you think back to early even smartphones, they would fail queries all the time. They'd get disconnected. Stuff wouldn't work properly. There's a little bit of teething happening here. I think the difference in AI and ML or LLM, is that the hallucination problem is real. And that in particular hasn't happened before.
And I think hallucinations are particularly disconcerting.
Yeah, because before you'd either get an answer or you'd get clearly gibberish or you get nothing or it'd just break. Whereas now you can get a very convincing sounding, consistent answer, which is totally wrong. And that's a very new class. Like in particular, that's a new class of problem.
And we're not used to confident incorrectness from machines.
Yeah. That Verge review of this AI pin, at one point he pointed the pin at a bridge, I think like the Brooklyn Bridge. And he was like, what am I looking at? And it very confidently listed.
Triborough Bridge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It was like the Triborough Bridge built it, blah, 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 blah. And like, as a tourist who's never been to New York, I would absolutely believe it. So yeah, that seems like what it is. And I think that particular problem we're going to have to adjust to, just like we had to adjust to SEO fiddling with PageRank or any other consistent technology that changed a lot of things.
I mean, though, the thing that's interesting about that is I wonder how much of tech's valuation, and multiples comes from consistent trust.
I think zero.
Well, no. What I mean by that is I wonder how much of how you value Stripe is that every time Stripe makes a transaction or Stripe says charge this credit card $24 for buying an X-Men poster, you should have charged that credit card $24 because that person wanted that X-Men poster. And like you can install these systems, you can figure out how much effort it takes to install these systems, and then you can very much predict what the value output is going to be. If it sells 1 billion X-Men posters and you pay $100,000 for this, then like that's well worth its weight in gold. And I wonder if you need a fundamentally different view on multiples for systems that, they're often right. It's like hiring a person who has 80-20 knowledge of an industry and hiring someone who truly knows everything.
Yeah.
Like you get a massive exponential increase in knowledge as reliability and confidence approach 100.
Goes 100. I mean, being an engineer, my approach here would just be ask it a reasonably large series of questions and figure out the distribution of correctness, and then say, okay, my 2 sigma accuracy is 80%. Good enough. I'm going to expect it's 80%. But I think the problem is, again, in AI, because it's or large language models in particular, they're non-deterministic, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, like
if I know it's 80%, great, but I can't tell from that if this particular question is well answered.
I mean, that magic sensor that we're really excited about right now. Like the reason we didn't do a magic sensor episode, someone else thought all their problems would be solved by magic sensor, and we currently think a whole bunch of problems will be solved for us with a magic sensor, but it's a non-deterministic sensor.
Yeah.
So like literally, to use that sensor, we're going to need a deterministic safety stack to run parallel to it, so that it might make us actually function, but that safety stack will make sure we don't get into too much trouble. Whereas like if that magic sensor was not on some distribution of how right it was, it would, replace things that are worth far more money than it, besides what we're already using it for.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be an interesting one. I wonder if there's this problem of observability and explainability. And I wonder if there's going to be a whole class of tools that are built around to do the statistical modeling around this.
I had a thought about that too when I was spoofing with a bunch of whatevers about AI. I wonder if the most explainable AI systems will be valued the least because you understand when they're stupid.
Right.
Like being confident about no, Ilya, you are foolish. The first table ever was made in the year 700 BC by an artisan in early China's Yuan dynasty. And you're an idiot for thinking any different. And then the fact that you notice that, the Yuan dynasty wasn't until the 1800s because you have a passing knowledge of Chinese history, and that therefore you should probably not trust anything I said about when that first table was made or where it was made, whether it was China or Egypt or, I don't know, Namibia. Like that itself will mean that if my AI system says, I believe the first table was made in the year 600 and I believe in the Yuan dynasty, then it's going to be a lot easier for people to think that system is stupid, whereas the more confident ones will get more credibility in the marketplace.
So your big discovery is that with human beings, being a con artist wins sometimes? I mean, that sounds plausible.
My big discovery is that feedback loops will incentivize AI that is stupider but more confident.
Yeah. So that is a real problem. There's a great kind of YouTube channel that dives into how they're building these systems. And a lot of it involves human in the loop feedback to train the algorithm. And I'm sure some percentage of these humans is actually going out and double checking the data and correcting on some whatever. But I'm also equally sure that some percentage of the data is like, yeah, that looks fine.
Yep.
Right?
Because my hunch is a majority of our listeners, don't have no idea when the first table was made. The year 600 BC seems a little late, but I don't know, maybe. And majority of the listeners probably have no idea which dynasties were in charge of China in which orders. And Yuan, sounds like a Chinese name, probably real, probably legit.
I mean, I was just assuming you meant SQL tables, but I thought it was a little early, but I'll trust you.
Ellie, why don't you wrap up all your thoughts for us? AI is great. It's the future. We're all going to live a glorious future.
It's an interesting
solar punk world.
Audience, notice Stefan asked me and then immediately filled the silence himself just for a glimpse into our, collaboration here. No, I think it's a very interesting tool, but honestly, the hallucination and confidence problem is unlike anything we've had before.
Yeah.
And I don't think humanity has yet built a tool or a mechanism to solve that. And the more we apply it to weirder situations, like I've seen papers and people interested saying, we're going to apply LLM to process the output of autonomous navigation for cars, to describe the scene, to then make judgment calls on what to do. And there are so many chains of black boxes in that I have zero confidence that any of that thing works, right? And you could get results that, because some of these systems will score their confidence. They'll say, I have a 99% confidence that this is a person in these pixel regions. You could get a 99% confidence and still have complete, utter nonsense as a result.
Or the fact that any number of AI companies that want to build explainable AI are just going to put another LLM on top of the first LLM to say why it thinks that thing.
Right.
So then you don't know whether to distrust the initial AI or the AI that's explaining you how the first AI worked.
Yeah. So I think this is actively being worked on by a lot of academics. There's a lot of papers on explainability and trustability and incentive alignment, interest alignment. But I have not seen a decent universal result yet. If you have seen one, send it to our knowledge AI system at polymathrobotics.com.
Well, I guess to ask you this spoofy question, do you think AI will make the world better, worse, or it's a tool and depends on how tool will be used, or which hand-wavy answer?
I don't know, honestly. My preferred outcome would be something like the Culture series from Ian M. Banks. If you've read that book series.
The 5th time you've recommended this particular series.
It's great. Yeah. One of my favorite. But the 5-sentence summary is that... We should start getting affiliate links for every random sci-fi series we talk about. Yes.
Because then we'd rake in $20, $30.
A year.
Total.
Yeah.
Lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. No, but the concept there is that humans are living alongside super intelligent AI. And the super intelligent AI is many orders of magnitude more intelligent than any individual human, but they concern themselves with problems that actually require that amount of intelligence, like steering an entire civilization or very advanced theory development or that kind of thing. And humans have the freedom to pursue whatever the heck they're interested in. If they want to paint, go paint. If they want to be a mathematician, go be a mathematician.
Nerds.
Great universe. That is the utopia I think we should strive for. But I don't know if we'll actually...
AI overlords that are nice.
No, it's not even a question of nice. It is, they are so far beyond human level interests that they're not even speaking the same language anymore. And dedicating effort to making sure that humans are happy takes up such a small percentage of their brain that they're happy to do it. Like, I will happily give up 1% of my brain to make my dog happy by taking it for a walk. Like, why not? Right? Like, and it's even 1% for them. So that's the like, but we are so many centuries away from that. Short term, the con artist stuff is probably more harmful than it has been helpful.
My hunch is all this is going to be a lot less of a big deal than we think. And we're going to start calling this particular batch of AI things some other word. And there'll be another AI boom in 20 years for some new technology that seems like AGI again. And we'll be going through all this all over again.
Move the goalposts.
Yeah.
Every time a robot starts to work, it's not a robot, it's an appliance.
Will be moved.
Yeah.
Probably in I'd call it like 2 to 4 years.
So,
and actually, you know what will precipitate the goalposts moving? It won't be like the first AI company IPO, but like by like the 15th, they'll no longer be primarily talked about as AI companies.
Yeah.
And then like AI will fade into the background and only mean AGI again. And LLMs will be called LLMs,
some tool,
or, context systems or whatever. Semantics intelligence.
So I will put a challenge to the listeners: $100 and a polymath t-shirt, $100 of Stefan's money and a polymath t-shirt for anybody who can come up with the new Turing test. Because clearly, because of LLMs, Turing test is no longer valid. So what is the new Turing test that we should apply for true intelligence? I saw one recommendation was like, let an agent loose onto the stock market and give it 3 months and see if it makes money. But I think that's
its own thing.
Yeah, that's its own thing, and that's too limited. Like, I don't know. How do we now judge a true intelligence? Yeah.
No.
Stefan will pay you. Send your request to knowledgeai at polymathrobotics.com.
We're going to need to buy that URL, not just the acronym.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, Ilya, what are we talking about next week?
This might be a 2-episode week.
Might be. We might slow roll the releases, though, to aid in our master plan of not looking entirely worthless.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Well, with that, talk to you all next time.
See you next time.